What's up, fight fans? Mainman here. Y'all know how I get down. We talking boxing, man. What up to the fam? What up to everyone in Mainman's boxing forum over there on Facebook? Hey, so look, man, I just wanted to come on through and give some final words on this upcoming Gary Russell Jr. versus Mark Magayo fight, man, that I'm really looking forward to tonight. Come on back through, fight fans, for an immediate post-fight reaction that the homie will be live and will break on down the results of this fight. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to it. You know, seeing my man Gary Russell Jr. back in that ring. And it's been going under 2 years since the last time we seen him. So it's going to be good to see Gary Russell get in there and display his talents. You know what I mean? So looking forward to it. So, I mean, everything that we know up to this point about the fight, I know there's a lot of fans who seem like they being a little wishy-washy about this one, you know? Everything, all of the details that came out about the fight, everything from Gary Russell Jr. Missing weight by 1/2 pound and then coming back and making it on his second try. People are looking into that. Then the fact that Gary Russell came out in interviews displaying that he has some sort of minor injury and he'll tell everybody what it is after the fight. And so people are listening to that. Then the inactivity, and mixed that with the fact he's also had family tragedies. And people think that this is the right environment for an upset. And if you are a boxing fan and anything you know about the fight game and you thinking that way, I can't be mad at you. I gotta understand where you coming from. You know what I'm saying? But I also think that you can't underestimate a dude who's just a champion at heart and always moved around the fight game as a champion. You know, there's layers and levels to fighters like that, you know. And I think in Gary Russell Jr.'s case, he knows his best attribute, I believe, on him, aside from his athleticism, hand speed, and stuff like that, is his thinking ability or his boxing IQ, however you want to name it. And I think that's big for Gary Russell. And he knows if he's in certain situations how to use certain tools to get himself out of certain situations, you know. And I think he's very experienced enough, even from his amateur days to his pro days, all of the championship defenses that he's been into, fighting guys who gonna go in there and fight the best fight that they've ever had to fight because they want to take the belt from him. He had to go in there against a lot of guys who had momentum and wanted to get in there and be successful and get that world title, but they, you know, fell short in each of his title defenses. And none of them had so much as dropped Gary Russell Jr. And these have been some big, strong guys. Some of them some good punches. None of them so much as dropped Gary. Gary has been counted out in some of those fights. Some people didn't feel Gary was going to win in a lot of those fights. But he's always figured out a way to pull it out. Now, style-wise, man, like I say, final thoughts on Mark Magayo, man. As I look more and more of him fighting, I've been watching a lot of his fights. And I'm looking at the last time when he fought the Southpaw Hermosillo. You know, I can't pronounce his name. And I'm just looking at how he was fighting him, man, and the way he was fighting and all of the things I'm seeing in his fight. And I've looked at several of his fights. I just don't see nothing stylistically about this kid that I believe that can affect Gary Russell Jr. I mean, it seems to me the number one thing you notice about Magsayo, he's not nearly as good as a fighter going backwards as he is for one coming forward, which is something that Gary Russell Jr. need to also take mind for, because this dude going backwards, he's more shells up, get into the defensive posture, and is leaky. You can get shots in. He can't retaliate or counter nearly as well going backwards. He does it more better when he's doing like an imitation of Manny Pacquiao and trying to go laterally and go sideways. And then he tries to counter, you know what I mean? Or maybe coming forward and countering. He does it much better in those cases. But going backwards, nah. And he's not nearly as good defensively sound, nowhere near as Manny Pacquiao. From what I noticed of him, like, he almost kind of, and I see why everybody try to call him Little Pacquiao, because he does a lot of like similar things like Pacquiao likes to do. He tries to get like some bounce in his rhythm. He tries to put bounce in his rhythm, but his bounce is not nearly as good as a Manny Pacquiao. He tries to do that little sidestep thing. It's not nearly as good as Manny Pacquiao. He's almost reminds me of like an Adrian Bronner version of Manny Pacquiao. You know how like you had AB and everybody thought that he wanted to be like Floyd? Well, it's almost like this is Manny Pacquiao's AB. And it's almost like that's what he does. He does things similarly, but not nearly as good, not nearly as well, and not nearly as fluid. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, man. And his hands are they're fast when he's coming forward and kind of imposing himself. But in a lot of cases, he doesn't let his hands go, and he gets in front of you, and he wants to do more footwork and scooting around, and it's like he doesn't let his hands go nearly as much. But it's looked like he's always looking to punch off the counter more so than leading off. He's more comfortable as a counter puncher than leading off, where he's not that accurate. But when he do land, it do got some crack and some thunder to it. But he gets pieced up, man, going backwards. He just gets hit with combination punching way too much. And it's like I said, he's more seemingly concerned on his footwork, but not letting his hand go. And he's just more good as a counter puncher. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just think that Gary can take advantage of this dude. He can run up rounds. Gary can hit him with combination punching and maybe even push him back, get him into that defensive posture. I believe that Gary's footwork is much better than this dude's. Gary can get outside of his punches much better as well. And, you know, Gary does this little thing where he gets into these like karate stances almost to a certain degree, and he starts to kind of whip his hands out. And instead of moving his feet, he'll move his more so upper body more. And I think against this guy, man, you know, use your feet more than your upper body, because you don't want to run. You want to run as little risk as possible of him clipping you. You know what I mean? So we'll see. But like I say, I need Gary to give him a lot of incoming fire. If this guy starts to go back, if Gary does hit him with combination punching and Magsayo starts to go backwards, I think Gary should jump on him at times, but be cautious. Because I'm telling you, Gary can score and run a lot of points up if he gets Magsayo to start to going backwards and taking steps backwards. I'm not impressed with Magsayo's legs. Like, he doesn't have sustained movement. He just have little scoots here and little scoots there. But as the fight goes on, it slows down. He starts to slow down a lot. You know what I'm saying? And his defense, once again, he gets hit a lot. But he takes the punches. He eats a lot of punches, and he gives out a lot of hurting. And that's the one X factor due to his youth that Gary Russell Jr. needs to worry about. My concern for Gary going into this fight is Gary giving him all that Gary can give him, and the kid still comes, and he's still coming. You know what I mean? He's still coming forward. He's still kind of bouncy a little bit. He's still kind of semi-fresh, and Gary's going to have to, you know, deal with that all the way to the final bell. And so that's the one thing that really does concern me, is that the fact that Magsayo can take a punch. And if he does get dropped, as we've learned about him, he will get up and continue to try to bring that fight to you. But once again, he's a pressure fighter to a certain degree, but he likes to try to box. And if he gets into somebody like he's doing with Hermosillo here, if he gets into more of a boxing match with Gary, I don't think he wins that fight, man. He will want to try to make it a war with Gary, and I don't want Gary to get sucked into a war with Magsayo. That's giving Magsayo way too much ground, way too much leeway to get back into the fight. Gary cannot get into back and forth brawls with the kid and things like that, and even doing too much tussling with him. You know what I mean? I told folks if it becomes an inside fight that I believe Gary has the advantage, which I still believe, because this guy, he's just not fast enough on the inside. Even this man, Hermosillo, who's the taller, longer man, seemingly was beating him to the punch on the inside. And on the inside, he's all floppy and he's flopping all over the place. He's punching himself out of position. And I'm talking about Magsayo, man. Gary Russell is a much better inside fighter. I mean, he can get combination punching off in the inside fast and crisp on this dude before this dude really can counter properly. He's not that good of a counter puncher inside. He's only good at counter punching. Like I say, when he's outside, you're coming forward and maybe him giving you incoming five. You flick a jab, he could try to come around it with a left hook he like to throw or an uppercut. But that's when he's best at countering. He's not that great at countering on the inside. You feel me? And so these are all things, man, I think Gary just takes advantage of. Like I say, looking at him on the inside, he seems to be more of he likes to grab and likes to tussle a lot, you know. And Gary just needs to be weird. He do it with him, tangle him up if he starts to get some punches off, but don't overly do it because he's younger. He's seemingly strong. Looking at recent pictures of him, he's big. And I don't want Gary to over tussle with this dude. You feel me? But Gary's too fast on the inside. His feet are fast. He can hit this cat with so much incoming fire. He can get combination punching on him. If he get him to go backwards, he'll fully take advantage of him then. And if Gary can do some investing to the body, because the kid is always open to the body, get him to drop them hands and maybe land more crisp shots while pushing him backwards, that's going to be dangerous as well. You feel me? So, I mean, look, man, it's nothing about the style that I see, man. I just don't. If anything about this, if anybody is saying upset, I think that It's more so because you think of the detriment of Gary. Not so much that the guy's so great and so good, but you think that something is up with Gary. You may think that Gary is injured, or his heart is not in it, or something may be up with him, you know what I mean? And if you feel that way, then given the signs that you've been shown, it's hard to argue with a lot of fans there. But I have a different belief in Gary because I've seen him get out of trouble and beat fighters, in my opinion, much better than Magsayo in the past. But once again, he wasn't inactive for 2 years, almost 2 years. That's true. And I don't know, I mean, that wasn't the case. And also he didn't cite injuries and things like that. And the last time we seen a weight issue with Gary, or missing weight and saying things were funny with scales, was Vasyl Lomachenko. And so those are warning signs. But I'm going to believe in Gary Russell Jr. because I just don't think this kid is the skill-wise nowhere near the level, man. I mean, even Freddie Roach, his coach, feels as though he gets too anxious in the ring. And it makes him start to not punch nearly as much. And he gets folded up to the body, and he's always in these defensive postures, and it's leaky. And he's not the one really imposing. The only time he starts to really impose is when Freddie gets in him, jumps on his head. Even in this fight, Freddie had to smack him to wake him up. Like, you got to wake up. And it was the same way in the Julio Ceja fight. Like, you got to wake up, and this kid has to find points in the fight where he wakes up. He may catch his opponent with something hard and something good, and then he turns it into some sort of brawl, and he takes charge of the fight. So these are the type of things that Gary will have to watch out for, man. That just lets him in. But skill-wise, if Gary makes this a boxing match, I can see Gary taking rounds comfortably. Just be cautious and not get hit with nothing too hard, too fast. You know what I'm saying? Be cautious. And those are the strongest words that I can leave for Gary Russell Jr. Like I said in my last video about this, be cautious, fight fans. But we will see. I'm looking forward to the night. Y'all come on, rock out with the homie, and I catch up with y'all real live soon on the live stream, man. Thumbs up on the way out if you didn't hit it on the way in. Share, rock the bells, man. Yeah, man, Gary just, and style-wise for Gary, he just does a lot of, at least the last time we've seen him, fight fans, everything he does in that ring is just 20 times better than what Magsayo does style-wise. We'll see, man. We'll see. Magsayo has a puncher's chance. And that's what I see. But we'll see. To the next video. Peace out.